Hello, everybody, and welcome to PowerViews Live. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. In just a moment, I'll introduce my guests, but first, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. You can use the Q&A box to your right for any questions. I am going to try to pick up the questions as we go through the session today. So just feel free to go ahead and put any questions you have on the right-hand side. The recorded presentation will be available within 48 hours, and it will be sent to all registrants at that time. We'll stick around for a few extra minutes at the end of the session today, which is scheduled to end at 1:30, if there are some additional questions. And if your schedule permits, you've got some additional questions, please send them in. The PowerPoint presentation is available. If you go to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can download today's presentation and use hashtag PowerViewsLive for any tweeting you'd like to do. And now I'd like to introduce my guests. Ginny, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gini Dietrich. I am the founder of an integrated marketing agency called Anthony Dietrich that's headquartered in Chicago and scattered throughout North America. I'm also the co-author of Marketing in the Round, the author of Spin Sucks, and the co-host of Inside PR.
And we're going to be talking a lot about Spin Sucks today. How about you, Anthony?
I am the founder and CEO of Arment. Oh, hang on, wrong line. I'm
Wrong one. President and Chief Sales Officer.
Yeah, sorry. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, and I'm a writer. Most people know me from the daily blog at thesalesblog.com and B2B sales coach and consultant.
And I'm Dan McDade, president of PointClear, as I said. We do lead generation, qualification, and nurturing. Last year, we helped our clients close about $100 million in business. I'm also a dad of 3. And really enjoy the outdoors, like to get out and do as much hiking and such as I can. Thought we'd start this out with kind of a contrarian view. You know, never try to be a thought leader. There's no value in that. Instead, try to add value. I think we probably all agree with that. That came from one of my favorite bloggers, Chris Brogan. You guys, any comments on that?
Can we agree or disagree with Chris Brogan?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think you want to disagree with Chris Brogan. Yeah, I mean, I understand what he's saying. I don't think that that's contrarian because you don't set out to be a thought leader. You definitely set out to talk about where you add value, what kinds of expertise you have, what kinds of information is in your head that you can share with other people. And that's how you become a thought leader. It's kind of like calling yourself the smartest person in the room. You can't walk in and say you're the smartest person in the room. Other people have to designate you so. And the same thing with a thought leader. Other people have to designate that for you.
You know, Chris is just a dear, dear friend of mine, and basically almost everything that I do, I stole from him. I mean, completely. And I wrote about this in the newsletter, my Sunday newsletter, a couple weeks ago. I mean, literally, I saw his newsletter come in on my phone on a Sunday morning, and I called him and I said, why am I getting a newsletter from you on Sunday morning? And he said, because nobody else sends you one on Sunday morning. I said, okay, why is it not formatted? And he said, because it doesn't look personal if it's formatted. I said, why is the font so big? And he said, because you're reading it on your phone, aren't you? And I said, yes. And I said, I'm going to steal this. And he said, do it. And I said, no, I mean, I'm going to steal it exactly, like everything, including the font. What font is it? He said, I don't know, you have to ask Rob. So I had to ask Rob. But this is the thing that makes Chris a thought leader, and it's that he's a scientist and he experiments with things and he fails very publicly, like I tried this and it didn't work, and I tried this and I can't get it to work. And then when he does something that actually works, he writes about it extensively, he teaches it, and he shares it. And I think the point that he's making here is that if the idea is that you want, if you want significance, if you want to be known, if you want these things, there's no way that you can be that. What you have to be is a value creator. And if you're somebody that adds value, you're going to get the attention and people are going to look to you for ideas. But there's 2 pieces to that. One, he actually does the work. So the reason he's worth following is because he figures out what's working and then he shares it. And the second thing is he really does just try to add value to the community. He's not trying to be a thought leader. He's trying to be a relationship guy. And if you were to say to Chris, and again, I mean, Chris is like a dear, dear friend of mine. If you were to say, Chris, you know, you're a social media guy, he would be like, you don't understand. I'm a community guy. Social's just tools. And he's more about how do I add value. And I think that's what makes this a real conversation.
You know what else I would
So
add
I
to
think,
that is, unless you see Chris in person, you don't truly understand this. But I think this is really important for people to remember. He remembers little tiny details that he's met. And it's not things like, oh, you're from Columbus or you're from Chicago or you're from Atlanta. It's, oh, you have a collection of Legos and the latest thing you built was the Death Star. Like he remembers this stuff that people have told him um, from wherever. And you can imagine at a person at that level has hundreds, if not thousands of people telling him little tiny details and he remembers them. So that I think sets him apart, and it's something that we all need to think about as human beings because technology has allowed us to get extremely efficient, but it's also created that opportunity for us to get away from our human interactions. And the real thought leaders, the real people who are out there doing the right things, and the people that you want to follow are the ones who remember your name, remember how you met, remember something little about you, even if you have to cheat and write it down somewhere. Those are the kinds of people that you want to follow.
I agree, and I think that our agenda today is talk about what is thought leadership and what isn't thought leadership. I think if the audience walks away with that information today, we'll have done our job. So what is thought leadership? This is a Wikipedia definition of thought leadership, and I think it was in Ginny in one of your blogs I picked up that the thought leadership term or phrase was coined in 1994 by the editor of Booze and Company magazine. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit as we get into the session today. Anthony, I think it was you that this Fast Company article by Daniel Rasmus really, it really resonated with you. This was the golden rules for creating thought leadership. You know, what can you say just jumped out at you about this article? What's important to you about this?
Well, there's a couple things. Let me back up to your prior slide. You can leave it on this slide, but what's interesting to me is you reference a Booz article from 1994, and the world has changed so much. I think that there was a time where people who were really thought leaders, who were actually doing the work and had practical experience and practical application, they knew these things, they didn't necessarily have an audience. And a lot of the thought leaders are people who a publisher came by and anointed and said, okay, we're publishing this one and we're publishing that one. And then this consulting firm went and got a publishing deal so they could publish. But now the people who actually do the work have access to people. So I think this part of thought leadership has changed dramatically. And I'll just tell you what resonated with me when I saw this is it says don't sell anything except ideas. And as a sales guy, that doesn't resonate with me. I mean, we sell because we take care of other people and that's how we help. But give it away. And one of the things that's interesting to me, I got a call from a friend who's a consultant, and he said, you know, and I'll apologize for the language. I'm using the language he used. I'm not using this to make a point. He said, you know, you're really an asshole. And I said, okay, I agree with that, but I'd like to understand why you're saying that. That would be more interesting to me. And he said, you give all your content away. Every day you publish a blog post on your stupid blog, and your IP is supposed to be.
So he's a big fan.
He is. He's a friend. I don't know if he's a fan, but he said it's you. You keep it behind the wall, and you never share it until somebody pays you to share it. And the conversation went on for a little while, and then he said, "And how are you getting all this work? And how are you getting these speaking engagements?" And I went, "Because I'm sharing what I know. I share everything that I know, and I'm giving it away." And people then are getting the experience of, like, what is it like to work with you? And that's the thing. You can't be a thought leader unless you're giving away your content. So you look at people like Ginny, who we have here, every day, it's content. Every time she posts, it's content that's actionable that you can use. And we started with Brogan. We can go back to Brogan. We could go to Vaynerchuk. I mean, we could go right down the list of all kinds of people who are thought leaders because they're giving all the content away. They're telling you, how do you do it? And the unique perspective helps. The vulnerability, this point says admit what you don't know, but the being vulnerable, I'll point to Brogan again. This conversation's been all Brogan, but this guy's totally vulnerable. I mean, he'll tell you, I failed miserably. This didn't work for me. I bombed. I can't get it to work. But that's the part that makes you say the other stuff that he says is true because he's willing to share with me when things don't work and the struggles that he's had. So he's got that connection piece, and I think that's what resonates with me about this idea.
When I would add there, like, I want to say 2, maybe 3 years ago. Remember McDonald's came out and they had a video that showed you exactly how to make the secret sauce for the Big Macs. And so now everybody can make the Big Mac at home, right? And so can Wendy's. So Wendy's launches a Big Mac burger. I mean, I can't remember what they called it. Something, but it had 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, and pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, and it had the McDonald's special sauce. The fact that A, I can't remember what it was called, and B, that it's no longer on menus says a lot. So here McDonald's has literally given away their secret sauce recipe, and no one can replicate it.
Yeah. Interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the this concept of how do you produce an idea that changes the way people think, and more specifically about the zeitgeist. I was actually a little bit, I don't know, I guess I was thoughtful about this because it was a article written by a managing director at Accenture. You can see his name here. And it was actually a study that was done 10 years ago, and then the article was written 10 years later. It was talking about how Harvard Business Review writers learn to kind of sync the zeitgeist, or what's kind of going on, what the mood is, what the Germans sometimes call the mood when they're speaking in English, how they manage to sync that with the very educated and savvy, connected readers. And one of the takeaways I took from this, and Ginny, we're going to come back to this with you in a couple of slides, but was that to some extent they were saying that the writers were writing what people wanted to hear as opposed to what was the truth. And one of the things, and I know Anthony, you and I have talked about this before, but we've all seen over and over again in the headlines, cold calling is dead, inside or inbound is king, and 70% of the buying cycle is done before a sales rep even needs to get involved. So I think one of the things that I think isn't thought leadership is basically kind of pandering to the current mood and talking about something that's not necessarily right or true or proven, but it's consumable, and because everybody else is saying it, it seems to be more popular for that reason. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
Go ahead, sir.
I think that's thought followership, and so some thought leader comes up with something, and then a whole bunch of people try to cash in on that idea. That's not leadership. I mean, leaders are 2 or 3 steps ahead of where the zeitgeist is right now. They're the next edge, the bleeding edge of the zeitgeist. We're not there with them yet. So I see things like that, and I know, I mean, in my world, when you talk about sales, when you talk about cold calling, people love to hear that they can be skinny and eat pizza and not work out, but they can be rich without making or saving money. I mean, anytime you're told you can have what you want and you don't have to work for it, it's a really sexy idea. But a lot of things, like even Challenger sale, Challenger comes out, and then we got son of Challenger and son of Challenger, and all these ideas come out. And it's people saying, hey, they're selling a lot of that. We could sell it too, because now we're going to hook on to the idea, and then the idea seems to blow up. But the people who are leading are already ahead of them, which is why you look for people who aren't right in the middle of the zeitgeist, but the people that are out on the edge that have the next idea that's going to come in. And I think a number of people on HBR, I can't remember the guy's name, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Omar, who wrote a lot of the conscious capitalism stuff. I think he's 2 or 3 moves ahead of everybody right now. I would tell you, I mentioned Vaynerchuk. I think Vaynerchuk's 2 or 3 moves ahead of everybody, and I think he's deeper into what he's doing than most people. And so you look and you say, where is he going? Because where everybody is right now, that's followership. It's not leadership. It's the people that are telling you this is the next thing. We'll go back to Brogan for 1 second, because he said when Vine came out, this is going to be huge and people are going to love it. And I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. He's completely wrong. And then I see my wife on the iPad and my kids on the iPad every day with Vine, and they love it. And I'm like, yep. He knew where the puck was going to be. And he was right. The 10-second videos, it's a platform. Instagram's modeling it. Twitter's coming after it. He was already ahead.
Yeah.
Well, now you have Meerkat and Periscope. Woo! Live streaming at my desk. Yippee!
Ginny, any additional thoughts on this slide?
No, I mean, I unfortunately I agree. So I'm trying to find something I disagree with so we can have a lively conversation. But it's
We had
unfortunate.
such a good argument last time we were together, and everybody,
I know.
they were like, you guys should argue more,
Yeah.
like brother and sister.
Well, I'm sure we're going to find something to argue about here. Ginny,
I'm
this
sure we
is
will.
something that you provided, so why don't you kind of take us through the 5 ways to become a thought leader? And you've got a lot of great content out there. We'll tell the audience that a link to this article is down at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, enticing to publications. Um, you know, it's interesting that we live in this world where we have the opportunity to be publishers of our own. I grew up in the big PR firm world where it was really imperative for you to hire a PR professional or a PR team, PR firm, because of their relationships with influencers and with the media, sometimes with politicians, legislators, and all that. And today, you have a huge opportunity to do all that yourself. And I hate to say that out loud because in some ways it works me out of a job, but social media allows you really to do that, and it has flattened out the world. So not only can you build relationships with the people that are influential in your space or the people that you respect and admire. I mean, a great example of this is I love James Altucher. I think that what he writes is, are you taking a picture?
No, I'm streaming us on Periscope.
Oh, good. Okay. See, his writing is very raw, and to Anthony's point earlier, everything he talks about his failures and his successes, his wins, and you sort of learn from him. And I've been consuming a lot of his content and sharing it. And because of that, and because of social, I've been able to build a relationship with him. And last week he friended me on Facebook, and I was like, I've arrived, I've arrived. So it really allows
I thought that
you
was
from
just
that
me.
perspective. No, I do it all the time. It allows you from that perspective to really build your audience and create that opportunity. I don't know that necessarily every organization should blog, but you should create content because content is what provides that opportunity to get your message out, to share all your secrets, to give away the secret sauce. Of course, you're not going to talk about things that are proprietary. Like if you're a public company, there's certain things you can't talk about. If you're a regulated company, there are certain things you can't talk about. If you're a private company, you probably don't want to share revenue or profit margins. So there are certain things you won't talk about because it's proprietary, but everything else, I mean, give it away. To Anthony's point, that's what makes you successful, and that's what makes people say, wow, I really want to work with him or her because of I can actually picture what it would be like to work with them. Um, Thoughtful commentary, really from the perspective of even if you aren't creating the content, and all of us are busy, and I know how hard it is. I mean, I blog every single day. It's not an easy undertaking. You can hire somebody to do that, but you have to sign off on it. You have to be able to provide your insight and your perspective, which another human being can't get because that's all in your head and all in your personality. But if you can sort of react to what's on paper and add that in, that helps immensely. If you are creating content and people are having conversations with you, I'm still of the belief and fall on the side of the fence that it should be you commenting back and it should be you engaging in those conversations. A really good example of this is we work with a Fortune 5 organization, and one of the CEO's objectives for last year was to build relationships with about 150 business leaders at other large corporations. And we took that list of 150 individuals, some of them at the same company, and we looked to see if they had a presence on Twitter. And I would say, 42 or 43 of them actually were on Twitter. And so we helped, we created the list, we helped build those kinds of things for him. My screen just went blank. We helped build the list for him. We helped create content for him to share all of that, but all of the conversations he had. And it was really successful from that perspective because they were talking to him. They weren't talking to a middleman or his assistant or one of us. They were actually talking to him. And we created it so that he only spent maybe 15 or 20 minutes a day on it versus 2 or 3 hours. Those are the kind of things that you really need to be thinking about in terms of thought leadership, because so many of us want to just say, okay, well, I'm going to outsource it and we're just going to use all these new tools to push and broadcast our message out and be done with it. And that's not what creates a thought leader.
How many, I don't know if either one of you have an answer to this question. I know when I had this conversation with Matt Hines, and it may have been with you as well, Anthony, it's how much time should you spend per week, whether it's blogging or, commenting on things in groups, or, what do you think the investment required is? Is it a couple hours a week, or does it just depend, and what are your thoughts on that?
It's exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes, no more, no less. Anything else, and you absolutely ruin your results. I mean, we need to be very specific and tell people, budget your time. Don't go over
2 hours and 12 minutes.
You have to hit it
per week.
Exactly. You have to hit it right on the button too. So any more or less.
Yeah, if it's
your whole
2:13, it's too much. Yep. Yeah.
It's done. It's too much. It's going to vary by organization. It's going to vary by goals. I think that there's so many variables there that what I would tell you is the investment is greater than you think, but not so much that you should worry about it. I mean, people, they think too much about, well, how much time is that going to take? It doesn't take as much time as you think it's going to take, but it's still a significant investment of time. But here's the challenge, Dan, that I see with a lot of organizations. They don't really understand the investment in the way that this returns. So we're talking about thought leadership. And Gini gave us a bunch of good points here, and I would add one from the prior slide. You have to do this in your voice, and this is the point that Gini's making, because it's your opinion. It's your view of the world. It's how you see things. That's what makes you unique, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it worth commenting on, is that you have some point of view. And if you can't share your point of view and you're trying to create content for SEO or for some other reason, it's boring content, it doesn't work, and you're wasting your time. You really have to put yourself out there and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is what my company does, and we think it's good and right and true and beautiful, and we think everything else is wrong, because that's where this is how we come at it. And so you're looking at Gini's notes here, which is essentially, she just said this. If you're using a ghostwriter, fine, but you better make sure it's your voice, because that's her view of the world, and she shares that opinion because that's what she thinks is right. I don't think that it takes more than a couple hours a week for most people to have a really good, strong social presence, depending on what you do. Writing's good. If you're a video person, video's great. If you have a great ability to engage with people and start conversations, that's great. Whatever it is, you do need to make the investment. There's no one right answer, unless Gini tells me I'm wrong, and it is exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes.
You're definitely not wrong, but it's definitely not 2 hours and 12 minutes. I think that as you start out, it's less, and as it gains momentum, it's more. When we started, it was just me on Twitter, and then I started blogging in 2000. Well, I took over the blog in 2010, and so now I probably spend 20 hours a week, but it's our number one driver of new business. So I consider it business development, not marketing the firm.
Gini, I thought this was interesting from you, the thought leadership by walking around, and I wanted you to comment a little bit about this, but also let you know, and I had a trade-off this morning. I could either read the note that said I need to go to the LinkedIn groups and participate, or I could walk around for 2 hours and talk to employees. So I decided to walk around for 2 hours and talk to employees. It was actually amazing, the response that I got, and it made me feel kind of guilty that I don't do more of that. But talk a little bit about this thought leadership by walking around.
Yeah, this is a nod to Jack Welch, who it probably didn't invent it, but at least made it popular, where you have to get out of your office and walk around. And I would say that that's the same externally as well. You can't just expect that you're going to sit behind your computer screen and tweet all day and not have actual conversations with people. But what this does is it allows you to build that thought leadership internally, because if you're trying to build that leadership externally and provide all this value for external audiences, but your internal audiences don't believe it or don't see you that way, you're not going to be successful. So really, the very best place to start is with employees. You have to leave your office. You have to talk to people. I was doing a workshop a couple of months ago, and a guy in the audience, I was saying, let's talk about some ways that you can collect stories about your employees, because employees and customers are really the best way to tell your company's story. Rather than saying, we're great and we do all these wonderful things, let your employees and customers tell it. And this man says to me, well, you know, I was walking through the manufacturing plant the other day. I never do that, but for some reason I decided I was going to walk through the manufacturing plant. And I discovered this kid who's been working for me for 3 years. Didn't really remember having met him before, didn't really remember his name, but he started telling me about these animals that he rescues and how he's really built this organization, this nonprofit, to help find these homes for these animals. And here's this kid, he works in my, he's like telling me this story. And I said, imagine if you walked the manufacturing plant every day, what kinds of things you would discover. And that's really what creates that level of trust. It creates collaboration. It creates loyalty. It builds your culture. And then you can extend that approach to external sources, such as your local media, your social networks, your prospects and clients, and all those kinds of things.
Anthony, thoughts?
I mean, it's still the most interesting thing to human beings are other human beings. I mean, that's been true for a long time. And so when you have a story and it has a human being and there's some sort of an arc in that story where, you go someplace like what Gini just did. He walks the floor, he finds out that the people that work for him are human and that they have wants and desires and they care about things. You're hooking on to the things that really moves people. We're moved by emotions, and we rationalize things after the fact. But when you're trying to motivate people to change their mind about an idea, there's nothing more powerful than a good story. I mean, that's the most important thing. And Ginny's right. You have the stories, and what I find in most organizations, what I'm talking about, do you have the stories? Do you have the insights? Can you have a customer conversation? They have it inside their four walls. They haven't taken the time to pull it out,
Yep.
but they have it. It's
Yep.
all inside there. And when you just start asking questions and start saying, what can you learn from your employees? Let me hear their stories. You find all the stories you need and then some.
One quick thought before I move on here is that, Jenny, I think you sent this to me. You said there's also an interesting thing that happens when you're perceived as an industry thought leader. Your competitors send you business. That's totally counterintuitive.
It's completely counterintuitive, but it works. It's the strangest. And the first time it happens to you, you think, this is weird.
Yeah. Jenny, your book, Spin Sucks, has 5 stars on Amazon. And we did refer to it a couple
It has
of
one
slides back.
star.
But
It has one star.
what's that?
It has one star.
I wasn't going to. Well, it's showing up as 5 stars. So, that's the majority of the review. But,
You're not trying hard enough. You need more haters, Jenny.
I know.
You're going to have to try harder.
But I found this fascinating. So talk to us a little bit about, how this ties into thought leadership and what some of your thoughts are from the book.
Well, my whole purpose of blogging in the book is to change the perception that we have to lie or distort the truth in order to win. I was watching Horrible Bosses 2. Don't ask. It was horrible. It was not as good as the first one. And the whole premise of it is that the guys are building a business together and they get screwed by their first customer. And he does it by cheating them and then just lowballing them and going in and buying the business after they have to go bankrupt. And this is the society that we live in, is that we have to lie and cheat to get ahead, which it shouldn't be the society that we live in. And so the whole point of my whole vision of what I'm doing here is to change the way that we market and communicate. And quite honestly, the only way that we can actually become true thought leaders is to share the good and the bad. I mean, to Anthony's point earlier about Chris Brogan, he talks about his failures and he talks about his success. James Altucher does the same thing. You have to be very transparent and honest, because otherwise, if you're only talking about the good and only saying, yeah, these guys rock, or this is awesome, then, or we had great success here, and not talk about sort of the failures that you had along the way, people just aren't going to trust you. So it really is about honesty, transparency, being a human being, and showing that everybody makes mistakes and you do too.
Anthony, do you think, and for either one of you actually, but this is going to sound like a dumb question, I think, but it seems to me like there's a blurring between content and thought leadership, that some people think content is thought leadership. And and somebody said just a few minutes ago, sitting at your desk all day tweeting is not thought leadership. And I know when I wake up on Sunday morning and Anthony, your blog is already in my inbox, one of the things that you're doing is inspiring, educating, just providing guidance. But each individual blog is not necessarily supposed to be thought leadership. It's kind of all of your thinking is the thought leadership. But do you see kind of blurring going on with content and thought leadership at this point?
You want to go first, Jenny?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, content and thought leadership are two different ideas. I mean, there's a lot of content that's designed for lots of outcomes. Entertaining is a great outcome for content. Inspiring is a great, content's a great delivery mechanism for other outcomes. Thought leadership, and I think you'll see this on anybody's blog or anybody who's really trying to create content and market their business that way. You're going to have a range of different outcomes that you want from some content. I write probably the most popular thing I write every week. I didn't do it this last Saturday, but on Saturdays I write on something I always call the Hustler's Playbook. And these were things I wanted to give my kids, ideas that I wanted to give my kids. And I thought, well, I'll just share them out here anyway because I want them to know how they have to behave. So it's all mindset. It's just all mindset stuff. That's all it is. And it's more inspirational, and it just is what it is. But that's what that content's designed for. I think I want to give my kids these things so they grow up. Believe me, they hear it every day. They know. But that's a different purpose than when I talk about how you sell, why you behave a certain way, and those are different outcomes that I want. So I think that's generally how it works. Content's content, but thought leadership, you're specifically trying to say, this is where we're going, this is the right decisions to make, these are the things to consider, here's how to get a certain set of results, and not all content has to be designed for that.
Yeah. Ginny, other thoughts?
Amen.
Anthony, I know we've covered some of this, but take us through any kind of closing thoughts you have with this slide.
Hey, this is just some quick bullet points. I think you have to decide what compelling content looks like. And to do that, you have to look through the person that you believe is reading your content. Go with this target audience. What are they going to be compelled by? What do they want to read? What do they want to know? What questions do they have that you can answer for them? And I think that if you think about that, how do I help? How do I give them the answers to the questions they're looking for? You're going to have content that tends to resonate with people. Or cat pictures always work too if that doesn't work for you. I think
They unfortunately do work.
they do work. You can't be a secret agent. And I get calls from people and I get emails from people that say, I'm putting a book out and I'm hoping you can talk about my book. And I look at their Twitter following and they have 0 followers or 11 followers and they don't have a blog and they've done no building. And they're super smart. They can absolutely create value. I know they have customers. There's nothing wrong with them, except that they're a secret agent. Everything is behind the wall. They're not sharing it, so nobody knows them. And so the problem they have is that nobody knows them. And you cannot be a secret agent. You have to be known for the value that you create today. And I see a whole bunch of people that write very, very sanitized ideas because they're afraid of sharing their best idea. I mean, they think, I'm going to go out to Ginny's blog today and pick a really good idea and then copy it from her. That doesn't happen. Nobody wants Ginny's idea. Her competitors, they may look at her, they may worry about her, but they have their own idea about what right and wrong is, and they're not stealing your idea. So you publish and you just do it fearlessly. And then I think you have to think about, how do I create it? So what's the best way for me to do that? I like writing and I like video, but other people have different ideas about how you create compelling content. And there's a lot of good ways to get to that answer.
Okay, good. I want to put our contact information up here. We've just run a little bit over on our time. Maybe before we wrap up, you guys can, just off the top of your head, you've already mentioned Chris Brogan, you've mentioned a couple other names. What thought leaders should people go look for as we come out of the video, out of the presentation today?
Well, I would say Anthony.
Oh, that was an easy one.
Do you have some names off the top of your head?
I got
you had
a
great
couple.
one. You had a great one on your show today, Mike Weinberg, who I had the pleasure of listening to on your sales kickoff, which was great. So that's one I'll throw in.
I'll give you one that doesn't blog a lot. You're not going to find anything in that area, but probably the biggest influence on my thinking right now is an American philosopher and developmental psychologist named Ken Wilber. And if you look up Ken Wilber and maybe start with this book, Cosmic Consciousness, on audiobooks, you get to hear it in his voice over about 11 or 12 hours of interview. And it will absolutely change the perceptual lens you use to view the world. So Ken Wilber, there's my thought leader for you.
Okay, thank you.
And
Any additional?
You're going to take a deep dive into the rabbit hole that way.
That's good. You know, for me, I like what Jay Baer puts out, mostly because he talks about, you know, what it's like to run a virtual organization, which I'm doing as well. So he has lots of tools and ideas from that perspective. Mitch Joel, of course, I've always been a big fan of. Oh, there's so many that I pay attention to. For me, what's most influential is fiction writers, because that's where I get the storytelling from. So I really take a fiction approach to storytelling from a business perspective versus, you know, saying, well, we do this, this, and this. I actually tell the story and provide some feedback that way, and I follow up as if I were writing a novel. So a lot of my influence comes from that.
Okay, well, thank you. We did have a question that I wanted to answer, that the recording will be available, will be sent out to all registrants within 48 hours. Thanks, guys, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.